Chapter 4, The Rabbit Sends in a Little Bill. It was the White Rabbit. He was hurrying through the hall muttering, "The Duchess! Oh, my fur and whiskers! She'll be so angry! Where did I drop them?" Alice realized he must be searching for his fan and white gloves. She started to look for them too, but they were nowhere to be seen. That's when the rabbit noticed her. "Mary Ann!" he yelled. "What are you doing here? Run home and fetch me my gloves and a fan, quickly!" Alice was so frightened she ran off at once. She didn't even tell him her name was not Mary Ann. "He thought I was his maid," she said as she ran out of the hallway. "How surprised he'll be. Still, I'd better get him his fan and gloves, if I can find them." As she said this, she realized she was no longer indoors. She had come to a small road, and there happened upon a little house. A brass plate on the door read, "W. Rabbit." She rushed in and hurried upstairs. "How strange to be running errands for a rabbit," Alice said. "I suppose I'll be running errands for Dinah next." Upstairs she found a fan and a few pairs of gloves. She grabbed them and was just about to leave when she spotted a tiny bottle. There was no label on it that said "Drink me," but she decided to drink it anyway. "I know something interesting will happen," she said, "and I hope I'll grow large again. I'm so tired of being such a tiny little thing." And it did make her grow, and fast. She had only finished half the bottle when she felt her head against the ceiling. She quickly dropped the bottle. "That's enough," she said. "I hope I don't grow any more. As it is, I can't get out the door." But it was too late. She kept on growing. Soon she had to kneel on the floor, and in another minute there wasn't room for her to even do that. She had to lie down with one elbow against the door. Then she had to put an arm out the window and a foot up the chimney. Finally, she stopped growing. That was good because there was nowhere else to go. But she was also very uncomfortable, and there was no chance of her getting out of the room now. "Mary Ann," she heard from outside the window, "fetch me my gloves this minute." It was the White Rabbit. She trembled, forgetting she was now 1,000 times bigger than him, and she had no reason to be afraid. He tried the door, but Alice's elbow was pressed against it. He couldn't get it open. "Then I'll go around and try the window," Alice heard him say. "You will not," Alice thought. When she heard the rabbit under the window, she reached out a hand and grabbed at the air. She saw a small greenhouse outside and tried not to hit it, but the rabbit must have knocked himself into it because she heard a shriek and a crash of broken glass. "Pat," Alice heard the rabbit cry, "tell me, what's that in the window?" Another voice, Alice assumed it was Pat's, answered, "It's your arm, Your Honor." "It's got no business there," the rabbit yelled. "Take it away." Alice spread her fingers and grabbed at the ear again. This time there were 2 little shrieks and sounds of more broken glass. She heard something being wheeled over, and there were now many voices talking. "Where's the ladder?" "Bill's got it." "Bill, bring it here." "Put them in this corner." "No, tie them together first." "They don't reach high enough." "Oh, they'll do fine." "Bill, catch hold of this rope." "Mind that loose shingle." "Oh, it's coming down. Look out below." A loud crash. "Bill, look what you did." "Who will go down that chimney?" "Bill, of course." "Bill, the master says you've got to go down the chimney." "So Bill's going down the chimney, is he?" Alice said. They made Bill do everything. She had her foot in the fireplace. She waited until she heard scratching in the chimney and then gave a little kick. "There goes Bill," she heard the voices say. There was something scrambling to catch him. The rabbit shouted, "Burn the house down." Now Alice had had enough. She called as loud as she could, "If you do, I'll set Dinah on you." Dead silence. Alice waited to see what they'd do next. A shower of pebbles came through the window, and something hit her in the face. But when the pebbles fell to the floor, they turned into little cakes. "If I eat one, it's sure to change my size," she thought. "It couldn't possibly make me larger, so it must make me smaller." Alice swallowed a cake. She was thrilled to find herself shrinking. When she was small enough to fit through the door, she ran outside. There she saw a crowd of animals. In the middle of the crowd, a lizard was being bandaged up by 2 guinea pigs. Alice wondered if the lizard was poor Bill, the animal she had kicked out of the chimney. Everyone else rushed at Alice, but she ran madly away into the woods. The first thing I've got to do, Alice said as she wandered into the woods, is grow to my right size. Then I need to find that lovely garden. It was an excellent plan. The only thing is she had no idea how to do it. I suppose I should eat or drink something, Alice said, but what? She looked around. There were flowers and trees and grass, but there was nothing obvious to eat. There was a mushroom growing near her. It was about her height. She looked at it and on both sides of it and behind it. Then she decided she might as well look on top of it. She stood on tiptoe and peeked over the edge of the mushroom, and her eyes met those of a giant blue caterpillar. Chapter 5, Advice from a Caterpillar. The caterpillar gazed at Alice for quite some time in silence. At last he spoke in slow, sleepy voice. "Who are you?" he asked. I hardly know, sir," Alice found herself saying. "I knew who I was this morning, but I think I've changed several times since then." "Explain yourself," the caterpillar snapped. "I can't explain myself, sir," Alice said sadly, "because I'm not myself, you see." "I don't see," the caterpillar said. "Being so many different sizes in one day is very confusing," Alice said. "It isn't," the caterpillar said. "Maybe you don't think so now," Alice said, "but when you turn into a butterfly one day, I think you'll feel a bit strange, don't you?" "Not a bit," said the caterpillar. "Well, maybe you'd feel no different," Alice said. "All I know is it feels very strange to me." "You?" said the caterpillar. "Who are you?" Which brought them back to the beginning. Alice was getting annoyed. "I think you should tell me who you are first." "Why?" This was a puzzling question. Since Alice could not think of a good reason, and since the caterpillar seemed so grumpy, she turned away. "Come back," the caterpillar said. "I have something important to say." This sounded promising. Alice returned to the mushroom to hear it. "Keep your temper," the caterpillar said. "Is that all?" Alice said. "No." But the caterpillar was silent for a long while. At last he said, "What size do you want to be?" She thought a moment. "A little larger," she thought. 3 inches is a wretched height to be." "It's a very good height," the caterpillar shouted, and he stretched himself out to his full length. He was exactly 3 inches. "But I'm not used to it," Alice cried. "You'll get used to it," the caterpillar said. Finally he yawned and shook himself. Then he got off the mushroom and crawled away. He called out, "One side will make you grow taller, the other side will make you grow shorter." "One side of what?" Alice thought. "The other side of what?" "Of the mushroom," the caterpillar said as if she had said it out loud, and he crawled out of sight. Alice looked at the mushroom. She tried to decide which side was which. The mushroom was perfectly round, so it was hard to tell. At last she stretched her arms as far as they would go. She broke off a bit of mushroom in each hand. She nibbled a little from her right hand. The next moment she felt a hard smack under her chin. Her chin had struck her foot. Frightened, she tried to nibble some of her left hand. Her chin was so close to her foot there was hardly room to open her mouth. She was able to squeeze in just one bite, and she began to grow. "My head's free at last," she cried, and when she looked down all she could see was a long length of neck. It rose like a stalk from a sea of green leaves below. "What can that stuff be?" Alice said. "And where have my shoulders gone? And oh, my poor hands! How is it I can't see you?" There seemed to be no chance of getting her hands up to her head, so she tried to get her head down to her hands. Alice was delighted to find that her neck could bend easily in any direction, like a snake. She zigzagged her head through the trees, and finally she found her hands. She set to work carefully nibbling one piece of the mushroom, then the other. She grew sometimes taller and sometimes shorter. At last she brought herself down to her usual height. With this done, she set off to find the flower garden. Suddenly she spied a house in the distance. The house was very small. She didn't want to scare whoever lived inside, so she ate another bit of the mushroom. She didn't go in the house until she was 9 inches tall. Pig and the Pepper. Alice wasn't sure if she should knock on the door. Suddenly a footman ran out of the woods. She thought of him as a footman because he was wearing a fancy uniform. If she were judging by his face, she would have thought him a fish. The fish footman knocked at the door. Another footman, this one with the face of a frog, opened it. They both wore powdered wigs. Alice crept closer to the house to listen. The fish footman gave the frog footman a giant letter. For the Duchess, he announced, an invitation from the Queen to play croquet. They bowed very low and their wigs got stuck together. Alice laughed so hard she had to hide deeper in the woods. When Alice came out of the woods, the fish footman was gone. The frog footman was sitting by the door staring at the sky. Alice approached the door and knocked. "There's no use knocking," the frog footman said, "for 2 reasons. 1, I am on the same side of the door as you are. And 2, because they're making so much noise inside, no one can hear you." There was a lot of noise inside the house. Alice heard howls and sneezes, and every now and then a great crash. "I shall sit here," the frog footman said, "until tomorrow." At this point, the door opened and a large plate came flying out straight at the frog footman's head. It grazed his nose and shattered on the ground. "Or the next day, maybe," the frog footman continued as if nothing had happened. Alice decided to go inside anyway. She stepped into a large kitchen. The Duchess was sitting on the stool, holding a crying baby. The cook was leaning over a fire, stirring the soup. The room was filled with the smell of the soup. Alice sneezed. "Too much pepper in that soup," she cried. There was also too much pepper in the air. The Duchess sneezed. Even the baby stopped crying to sneeze. The only 2 creatures in the room who did not sneeze were the cook and a giant cat. The cat sat on the ground, grinning from ear to ear. "Please, would you tell me," Alice began, not wanting to be rude, "why does your cat grin like that?" "It's a Cheshire cat," the Duchess said. "That's why." "Pig?" Alice jumped, thinking the Duchess was talking about her, but it seemed she was talking to the baby. Alice continued, "I didn't know Cheshire cats grinned. I didn't know cats could grin." "You don't know very much," said the Duchess. The cook took the soup off the fire. Then she began throwing everything nearby at the Duchess and the baby. It was a shower of pots, pans, and dishes. The Duchess took no notice, and the baby howled. Since it had been howling before, Alice wasn't sure if the dishes were hurting it or not. "Please mind what you're doing," Alice cried, jumping out of the way. A saucer sailed by the baby's face. "Oh, his poor nose." "Here," the Duchess said, "you hold it if you want it," and she pushed the baby into Alice's arms. "I must go get ready to play croquet with the Queen," the Duchess added, and she hurried out of the room. The cook threw a frying pan after her. The baby squirmed wildly in Alice's arms. She could barely keep hold of it. She ran out of the house with the baby. "I have to take this baby away with me," she thought. "It's far too dangerous here." The little thing grunted in her arms. "Don't grunt," she scolded, and she pushed the blankets aside so she could see the baby's face. The baby had an odd nose. It looked more like a snout than a nose. Also, its eyes were terribly small. It wasn't a very cute baby. The baby grunted again. Alice assumed it was probably just crying, but it couldn't be crying. There were no tears. "If you're going to turn into a pig, my dear," Alice said in all seriousness, "I'll have nothing more to do with you." The little thing grunted again, loudly. Alice looked into his face in alarm. This time there was no mistake. It was a pig. It seemed absurd for her to carry it any longer, so she set the pig on the ground, and it trotted happily away into the woods. "It's a dreadfully ugly baby," Alice said, "but it makes a rather handsome pig." Alice was startled to see the Cheshire cat sitting on the branch of a tree. The cat grinned at her. It looked nice enough. Still, it had very long claws and many teeth, so she felt it should be treated with respect. "Cheshire cat," she said politely, "would you please tell me which way to go from here?" "That depends on where you want to go," the Cheshire cat said. "I don't care where," Alice said. "Then it doesn't matter which way you go," the Cheshire cat answered. "So long as I get somewhere," Alice added. "You're sure to do that if you walk long enough." Alice tried another question. "What kind of people live around here?" "In that direction," the Cheshire cat said, waving its right paw, "lives a hatter. And in that direction," it pointed the other paw, "lives a March hare. Visit either. They're both mad." "Well, I don't want to be around mad people," Alice said. "You can't help that. We're all mad here. I'm mad. You're mad. How do you know I'm mad? Alice asked. You must be, said the Cheshire Cat, or you wouldn't have come here. Alice didn't think that proved anything. Will you be playing croquet with the Queen today? The Cheshire Cat asked. I would like to very much, Alice said, but I haven't been invited yet. You'll see me there, the Cheshire Cat said, and then it vanished. Alice wasn't surprised. She was quite used to odd things happening by now. The Cheshire Cat appeared again. By the way, what became of the baby? It asked. I forgot to ask. It turned into a pig, Alice said. I thought it would, the cat replied. It began to vanish again, but this time quite slowly, beginning with its tail and ending with the grin. The grin remained some time after the rest of the cat had gone. I've seen a cat without a grin, Alice said, but a grin without a cat? That's the most curious thing I've ever seen in my life. Alice waited to see if the cat would reappear. When it didn't, she walked toward the March Hare's house. I've seen hatters before, she said to herself. The March Hare will be more interesting. Besides, it's May. Maybe he won't be raving.